Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Tim. So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Thursday, March the 18th, 2021. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And we'll give Michael just a moment to get dialed in. And yesterday we had, well, for the last few days, we've had some awesome conversations. And I'm thinking that Doug will call in today and maybe complete the conversation that started yesterday. And then I will combine the two shows and put them out as a special show to listen to. Tapped into a lot of really awesome things. And so hopefully he'll call in. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. We have this beautiful day happening here in Bristol, Virginia. Just had some good and hot thunderstorms. 2 clouds in the sky, sun's coming out, temperature's about 50 degrees, absolutely beautiful. And so we welcome you, and we're delighted that you're here to participate in this conversation. And I did text Doug, and he was going to call back in today, so we can pick up our conversation from yesterday where we were talking about integrity in relationships and the difference between problem solving and healing. And we do a workshop called Communication. Did you hear what I think I said? And Jeannie, maybe you could just let me know if Doug clicks in. Communication, did you hear what I think I said? And in that workshop, we point out that what most people want to do is just solve their problems, and that is, of course, somebody else is the problem here. And so if I could just give you the instructions to change, I wouldn't have to be an upset and disturbance, and then my problem would be solved. The insanity of that logic is that whatever that person is doing isn't the cause of your pain or disturbance. It's actually a call for you to heal your internally generated pain or disturbance. So what we suggest when we go into the steps in responsibility communication is that you first move toward healing, and then once you've done the healing work, or you've at least initiated the healing work, then, and oftentimes, of course, problem solving is appropriate. Then step into the problem solving aspect of it. Do the healing first. So, Doug, I was just opening the space for our conversation to continue from yesterday. So delighted that you're here. What direction is your mind going this morning or this afternoon?
Well, I've been. Let me just launch off of what you just said. I'm always have trouble knowing where to start and how to put my words together, but it's balanced.
That's a thought.
Okay. Thanks.
I mean, I could change that thought, or I could stick with that and live my life by it, whatever I want to do.
I'm fully on board with the concept of. I mean, yesterday we talked about a lot of things, and I've been listening to that, thinking about it, and I feel like I'm fully on board with the idea that we want to function out of a enlightened or a truth-based mind, not one driven by our non-being, hidden, suppressed, unforgiven content that's creating realities in our consciousness that cause us to believe that someone else, some other thing, whatever, to go into denial, that our partner in particular is the cause of the problem in our life, and then driving us to leave or make other errant choices that only put us into a repeating, why is this happening to me again, downward spiral. But the question that arises for me is that we were discussing why you put I will never leave in the commitment, and what you just now said was
I didn't put that in the commitment. That's not in the commitment.
Okay.
Don't accuse me of that kind of stuff. I never put that in the commitment.
All right. We were discussing, I'll try and correct this, and you can correct me or help me correct it, that we were discussing, and you were talking about how you put in there something about trying to break a pattern that you said you once had of leaving every time there was a problem, something like that you would stay and be present love instead, something to that effect.
There it is. So,
okay.
So when I'm going to create something new out of an old pattern that I spot, what I have to do in order to actually create it is shift all of the thought disorders around the errant part of my mind. So if I had put in the commitment, well, I'm not going to leave again, guess what my mind energy is moving me in the direction of doing? I'm going to get up and leave again. What the commitment says is I'm here for you and with you. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep communication open and keep love conscious, active, and present as we heal, celebrate life, and grow together. That was my correction in my own mind to the whole generational pattern of leaving.
And that sounds powerful, 100% on the mark and perfect for me. And the thing that I was hearing you just now talking about the difference between healing and problem solving, and the need to heal first and then problem solve. And then the question that's sort of in my mind is there ever, and we touched on this a little yesterday, and I think we concluded that the answer to question is there ever an appropriate time to leave, is if you can see that you are being nothing but constant, present, active love, then maybe it might be. Would that be correct?
Well, a more complete thought for me, the one that I offered yesterday, was that, that's up to every individual to determine for themselves. For me personally, what I found produced healing for me was to take leaving off the table. Whatever happens, I've taken leaving off the table. And, of course, everybody has to create their own standard for that. What am I going to do with it? And everybody has the right to say, enough is enough, and I'm out of here. But for me, where I saw my healing and why I put the language in the commitment that I put into the commitment was that this is what, seeing as how I'm a creator, this is what I'm going to create. I'm not going to buy into this game, well, they might be the problem, therefore. It's like, no, here's the result I'm committed to creating. Now, if I leave myself wiggle room, well, here's the result I'm committed to creating. If you fulfill my goals, I'm just right back in the same pattern of leaving. So for me, there was no condition. It's just, I'm here. That's it. I'm here.
So I want to be clear. My goal here is to make the software platform, to make sure the software platform for how I process and operate in my life is as accurate and as crisp as it can be. And in what I mean by that is I hear in the software platform that you've established as most productive for yourself, the order of operating instructions include, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here.
Yep.
And then it includes that for others, they have the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. I'm in agreement that we should never leave. We should never leave unless we've gotten to the point where we're sure we're not leaving for non-being content and sane reasons. But what I'm trying.
And notice that in that process of being a creator, what you're saying to yourself is, well, just in case I'm not a good enough creator to create the result I want, I'm going to leave this back door open. I can leave if I decide to, because now I'm in being and therefore I can leave. My offering is, if you're truly and totally in being, there's going to be so much healing happening around you, there'll be nowhere else to go.
Well, see, I'm trying. This is. My goal is to stay. My goal, however, is also to make sure.
Then close the back door. The back door.
I do not want to have what I do have. I'm going to say what I want. I want to make sure that the operating system that I'm functioning under is as accurate as I can make it. And so So when I look into this question, what I see, what comes to mind, for example, is that if I'm errant about this, in other words, it's like if when you're in a relationship, you're binding yourself when you're committed, and you're saying, I'm not going to leave. Like
I would never say I'm not going to leave, or I realized that I'd be pointing in the direction of leaving.
Okay, I'm going to stay. If you say I'm going to stay
for you
forever.
and with you. Keeping communication open. And keeping our conscious active and present.
So one could do all of that and still choose a different relationship, right? I mean, you stay conscious, active, committed, with them.
Well,
keep communication open.
Let's go back to Yeshua's original, what I consider to be the original instruction on how we create. If we go to the opening words in the book of John, go ahead.
Can I don't know that the reason why I'm inquiring into this is as clear as I'd like it to be. I'd like to make sure it is before we go into a solution.
Okay.
Is that my sense is that when we commit to someone, that they and we become bound together for life. And maybe for some people at least, circumstances are going to change and someone else would truly be the person that they could better fulfill their life purpose with. That's an open question for me. And I don't want to have a software program that would actually create more pain, suffering, or prevent growth. If that's true for some people under some circumstances, and I'm thinking particularly of my partner now, who is divorced, because she was with someone who started and continued to increase in drinking and alcohol consumption and refused growth, wouldn't look into
distraction,
would not look into healing. And after 6 years of staying with that person, doing everything she could in her own personal growth, she decided to leave that person. And I think that was probably an appropriate choice, a higher path choice, not a lower path choice. And I think that in life, sometimes we get into a relationship with someone and then we find that we fulfill a purpose or we complete a mission with that individual, and maybe it's time to move, would better serve both of us to move to someone else. And I just want to clarify that question in my software, in how I look at life. That's the purpose.
Okay. So here would be the bottom line of what I hear you saying. Let me decode in the context of creatorship what I hear is the bottom line. I am totally committed to you unless somebody better comes along. That's what you just said. Unless you become the bad guy, and then I can be the good guy and proclaim it's time for me to leave.
I don't know that I'm reluctant at this point to concede that is not an oversimplification of what I've said. I honestly feel like two people could arrive at a point where they feel like they would be better served to not stay in certain circumstances, and I'm looking into that question deeply with you. So that's
okay.
Maybe I'm in error. But
okay. Let's go back to how creatorship works. I hear you. I hear you loud and clear.
I feel heard.
So I'd like to shift to this whole conversation from the perspective of creatorship.
Great. Let's do it.
So here I am, a human, a created essence called love, a creator, with an instrument to express through a body-mind unit. My instrument has 1,000 generations of God only knows what in it. And if I just count 30 generations, this is as far back as I've gone in doing the math, If you do the math, in 30 generations, there are 1.6 billion people in your bloodline. And I would suspect that for you or me or Jeannie or anybody else who's listening, if we went back and surveyed 1.6 billion people, we'd have people who've left and people who stayed and people who murdered and people who got murdered and people who abused and people who healed abuse and everything else we could imagine in terms of human joy, aliveness, creativity, suffering, pain, and trauma. Does that make sense?
A huge amount of pain, suffering, and trauma is in our biology. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, the good stuff, too. We got the positive side. I'm sure that in your bloodline and mine, there are people who came together in joy and aliveness and created wonderful, abundant, fruitful lives together. I'm sure there's that, too.
Sure. This is related to what you were saying yesterday about what's in our bones, what you saw.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And what I'm committed to healing if it has been locked in bone.
Right.
So it's all there. So person A meets person B, resonance, attraction, and they decide they're going to marry. And they create a marriage agreement, and their marriage agreement says, as long as this is working for me and you're fulfilling my goals and I'm fulfilling your goals and you like it and you're happy and I like it and I'm happy, we'll hang together. But if you don't fulfill my goals or I don't fulfill your goals and I become unhappy or unsatisfied, then I'm going to move in another direction. I'm going to break the commitment with you and I'm going to go play with somebody else who's more attractive at the moment. So if that's the agreement, and if you remember that this body-mind unit has a major attribute, and its attribute is inertia. If you remember from physics class in high school, the definition of inertia is a body moving in a particular direction at a particular rate of speed will tend to continue to move in that direction at that rate of speed until it's acted upon by an outside force.
Right.
So if those two come together with their inertia-bound egos and all that history for both of them, and if the purpose of life is to truly heal us and the Creator has created a world where the law of resonance governs and we're going to be drawn to people who, number one, are going to give us the opportunity to heal and show us everything in us that needs healing, then if my commitment is, as long as I'm liking it and I'm happy with it and things are cool, I'm staying, otherwise I'm not. And if the propensity for action in carbon-based memory in the generations is, I'm out of here, and if it so happens that my partner has a matching bag of garbage, which is quite likely, I'm out of here, then probably when one or the other begins to do actions that bring up that which is less than love, one or both at some point will say, too much suffering caused by you, and that will be a lie. It will be, the real statement there would be, there's too much suffering happening in me that you're bringing up in me, therefore I think I can solve this by leaving, and so I'm out of here. And if you notice the suffering that maybe you left, and I'm not saying you as the individual here, I'm saying the generic you, anybody who's listening, the suffering that you left the last relationship for and the one before that and the one before that, it was all justified to leave because they caused so much suffering in you, right? But you'll notice that it's the same suffering today as the last time and the time before and the time before. Because that's what relationship does, is it brings up everything that's in need of healing. And until one or the other or both people in the relationship develop the skill of really, truly honoring love more than they honor their trauma is not going to melt. It's going to tend to reinforce and exacerbate. And the thing that's going to tend to govern the creative process will be the unconscious dynamic of the creative process each person brings to the table, to the relationship. My offering, and I think you've heard the On Creating Consciously workshop before, is that what I choose to do is I choose to be a conscious creator and to clean up my unconscious. So if I want to know what conscious creatorship is about, if I go to the opening words in the book of John, the Greeks tell us, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In the Aramaic, that's not what it says at all. What it says is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. In other words, the preponderance of mind energy is going to run the creative process. Now, if I go into this relationship with, okay, let's create a relationship, and the mind energy I bring to it is, we want this wonderful, happy, holy, healthy, eternal relationship, but in my unconscious, and the person who's probably got the matching bag of garbage, the person I'm marrying, in her unconscious is, yeah, and when the going gets tough, the tough go shopping and leave. Then when that energy starts to come into the fray, I'm no longer a conscious creator, but I'm now an unconscious creator. Those dynamics are going to play out if I make a true commitment to eternal relationship. They are going to play out. And when they begin to play out, if I put a clause in my creative process that, well, if this isn't going as well as I thought I would like it to, then I have the right to leave, then that clause is going to be invoked, and I'm going to tend to find a reason to leave, because that's what so many generations have done. That's look at the culture. We're 60% divorce rate. And so if I put the mind energy in of an addendum that says, and if the going gets tough, I can say, I'm out of here, then probably that's what's going to become active, because that seems to be the propensity of information about relationships in our whole culture. And, if you look individually in your life and in your relationships, and in her life and her relationships, that's what's played out. So I'd take that clause out of the creative process.
Okay. I can see why you would, and that seems appropriate. I mean, I understand the reasoning for that. What you've described in my mind is what happens almost all the time, what's going to happen all the time in relationships. And then I guess maybe I'm just willing to let this stop here and go, and talk about something else. But but at the same time, I feel like once, to be sure that the software is correct, it suggests that irregardless of if you work through all those issues and you clear all those things, and then that there's no possibility that you'll find, my interpretation of anyway what I'm hearing, and I may be wrong even in how I'm hearing it, but is that this is suggesting that in the programming for the operating system for how I'm going to live my life, I have a position that says there's never a circumstance under which two people would find it truly would be to their both for not the non-being reasons that you just described, that non-being process, but for being reasons of truth, that there would never be a circumstance under which they would find that it would be better for them to stop being together in that relationship. Am I mishearing?
Totally, completely, 100%. Yes.
Okay.
Those words, those thoughts have not crossed my mind or entered into my creative process. I hear your mind injecting that, but that's not part of my conversation.
Okay.
What I said was, I'm here for you and with you, keeping communication open and keeping love conscious, active and present as we heal, celebrate life, and grow together. Now, if I put that other addendum in that you just injected, I now open the pathway for a whole different creative process to occur. I'm not really 100% committed to this creative process. I just put another, escape route in. And if there's an escape route, my generational patterns say I'm going to create a situation where I'm going to feel like the escape route is worthwhile. Now, let me just offer the way that this has worked for me. I lived in a world where, the first time I was displeased. I was gone. That was it. I'm out of here. I'm out of here. This is so. I mean, I lived my life that way for a long time. When I really started to teach the healing through relationships work that I do, I really got the power and the meaning of a truly committed relationship. And I entered into one with the person who you know. And that was an eternal commitment to me. And she decided that, you know, it was too much work to do this work, too much work to be on the road. And I want, you know, gee, you've trained me to do this work. I charge $80 an hour to work with people. You charge $600 an hour to work with people. Let's just go find ourselves a nice home in a nice city and make some good money and hunker down and have fun. It's like, well, no, actually, I have a commitment. You knew that when we met, and you joined in that commitment that we're going to take this to every mind on the planet. And her choice was no, and she left. And, you know, I actually, when she made that choice, I literally took 6 months off. I did nothing. I traveled nowhere. I holed up at heart, and I just did my work. I just cleaned up my mind, my pain, and my trauma around that. And a time period later, Jeannie and I connected and met, and we decided to marry and created an eternal commitment. And we've been together 16 years. And so here's how it's worked for me. You know, I had that one in my past, and for me, I'd pretty much cleaned that up. But I drew somebody who had the leaving issue. Jeannie has shared previously. And we went through many layers of that. We, you know, there's a lot of abuse in her past, a lot in my past, and there have been some pretty crazy times between us. A lot of stuff coming up. And we kept going back to the commitment, and we kept doing our work individually and together. And layer by layer by layer, cleared out the drama and the trauma, and still had stuff to deal with, and still have stuff to deal with. And I'll just say that, you know, choosing to be a creator and to be here, period. And if you've been listening to the show, it's just the last few weeks that a whole new level of pure presence, pure delight and joy and intimacy has occurred for us, like beyond what I could have imagined. And, you know, for 16 years, we've worked through many, many, many layers. You know, if you listened to the show just a couple of weeks ago, Jeannie opened up, and, you know, when she was 16, she got married to a man who was, you know, basically, in regards to sexuality, functioned like an animal and was just horrific. And after 16 years of being together, she finally opened that file in her mind and shared. And I think she was a little bit shocked with herself after she did, that she shared all, you know, the details of what had happened. And we just moved the energy through that. And it's just created a whole new level of delight and joy and aliveness in this relationship that at times I think both of us, and I'll, you know, open the space for Jeannie to speak for herself, both of us wondered, are we ever going to get through this? I don't know, Jeannie, you have any thoughts there?
It definitely, in the last couple of weeks, has taken a different level of working through. But, yeah, there were times, and like you said, you know, leaving has always been my go-to. You know, when I feel like my back's against the wall, it's like I'm out of here. And I've repeated that throughout my life, and not just in relationships, you know, with formers or anything, but also, you know, when I was a young girl, the reason I left at 16 was to leave home. And so it's just making the commitment to stay. And
I was just going to say, an important part of your healing that issue was to recognize that who you thought was your powered person wasn't your powered person, but was someone in your life that you deeply cherished, but had a leaving issue. And that was a big piece for you to look at and process through.
Yeah.
But what I'm still struggling with, honestly, is the idea, even in hearing what you said, did not leaving serve you at points in your life? Did that not serve you?
Oh, yeah. If
Doug,
I
you're
actually,
looking for a doorway.
And I don't know how, to explain that except that there was physical danger. It wasn't that we just disagreed with each other. He physically abused me every day that he was there. I don't think I would be alive today if I had stayed. But so, yes, anybody that's in a physical situation, they need to remove themselves. But,
take care of yourself.
If it's not, yeah. But then I had 50 years of work to do around it. So while I left the situation, it never left my mind what was going on for me. And I never talked about it. I mean, when I told Michael last week, that was the first time I had told anybody what all had physically been done to me.
That must have been an incredible burden to hold on to for yourself, with just yourself. And a great relief, I imagine. All right. I don't know.
So I'm gonna cycle back, and I think we beat the horse about as much as it needs to be beaten. I'm just going to cycle back to me, the core principle of it is, if in fact, in the beginning is the mind energy becomes flesh, and we're talking about a literal thing that happens when we think a thought. The thought turns into a neuropeptide. The neuropeptide becomes a molecule in tissue. Then, for me, I want to be really clear about what molecules I want in my tissue. Do I want molecules of, well, if it doesn't work out, if we decide that it would be better for us to split, do I want those molecules in my structure? Thank you. As a creator, if I'm truly committed to a certain goal, I don't want one molecule that goes against that goal in my structure. I don't want one thought that goes against that. I want to make sure that everything is consistent and on target for what I'm truly committed to creating. And if I'm not committed to creating that, if I'm not committed to dealing with what I need to deal with in me, my mind, I would offer, is going to give me excuses for, well, I better put a little addendum in here and there just in case.
All right.
And I support your thinking in terms of stepping up as a creator to create what it is you're going to create.
Right.
And eradicate every other molecule. Forgive every other molecule from your structure, right down to your genetic toes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So for me, looking into those genetic thoughts and molecules about leaving and about everything else I'm loving is the priority. This is what needs to be done.
Are you breathing?
Yeah, I was just noticing
Good.
that. Why I took that breath.
Doesn't sound like it from here.
It doesn't? It does.
Mm-mm.
So, yeah, perhaps there's nothing else that's pushing into my mind at the moment other than I am curious about if you want to express a little more about what sounded like something I hadn't heard before you speak before yesterday that intrigued me about how once you get to it's unrelated to my immediate issue, but how once you get to the point of being able to stop our minds from generating these images through forgiveness process, generating these drama images, that then we can go directly to the process of root content healing. That I'd be interested in hearing you expand on a little bit if you want to. Otherwise.
Sure. Actually, we ended up, this was a part of the conversation, our intensive last night. We kind of extended that conversation a little bit further. And I'm just speaking, and the key to this one for me, as I'm beginning to understand it, and I'm not saying I understand it fully at this point, the necessary component is that I take the time to function as a human being rather than a human doing, and I cultivate my relationship with conscious, active, present love, so that my physiology is fueled by love, which is what I believe it was designed to do. When I watch our granddaughter from the day she came into the world in the pure presence of being the love that she is, I've realized in interaction with her, and she's now 29 months been circling the earth, I realized that my job as a father with my kids, and I didn't do as well at this as I wish I had. I had some understanding of it, but not the understanding I have now. But I've learned that my job as her grandfather is for me to have cultivated the presence of love in me so that I stand in the room with her as the presence of love. And that my awareness of her comes through that so that I see only her being as the presence of love, and by resonating with that, help to draw her true being into this form that was created out of the genetics of what we call her mother and her father, our son and daughter-in-law. And what the world tends to do once one of those forms is created is they tend to fall, especially the people who are genetically attuned and connected with her, will tend to play out of the genetics. You know, if she's got hostility in her genes, plays out, and I'm genetically connected, I've got some of the same hostility, it's going to tend to resonate in me. Now, I'm going to do one of two things. If she does something that resonates the genetic hostility in me, is I'm going to stop and go, oh, wait a minute now, my job as her grandfather is to be the presence of love, and there sure isn't love, so I'm going to forgive this frustration or anger or sadness or grief or rage that's moving in me, so that I can be restored to the presence of love with her and hold the space for whatever it is that's moving in her to process out, rather than getting lost in it, reinforcing it, and making that part of the foundation of her personality. That I'm going to stand in that space, identifying her as that, and literally like I'm this kind of a metaphor for it, like I'm offering the being that Arya Rain is as love a hand to step into a form that isn't totally in alignment with that, and to support her throwing off what isn't totally in alignment with that, and really holding that hand out every instant we're together to bring her as created love into this world. So what I realize is, and I mean, it wasn't necessarily conscious in the early days, but what I realize is it's about really cultivating a relationship with the true being that you are, which is a reflection of, or an aspect of, or created by the Creator. And, and then I think what that triggers in me is I go back to, the Jewish traditions, which, being in the Christian tradition, I've had some education in, and I hear them talking about, and the way the world tends to talk about is what you're not going to do. It's the Sabbath. You're not supposed to work. You're not supposed to, there's some, Jewish circles in which they go so far as it's work to turn on a light. You can't even turn on a light switch on the Sabbath because that's work. It's all about what you can't do. But I now understand and hear that as what they were saying is you need to dedicate a significant part of your life to cultivating your relationship with love, the relationship with the true being that you are and the Creator. And when that becomes fully fledged in you, and I'm kind of making that up as a statement, but I'll use that at this point. When that becomes fully fledged in you, what I'm observing is something happens. And what happens is, if there are traumas, if there are unresolved issues in you, the normal way people deal with it is they go through their lives, somebody gives them the look, their mind generates a trauma-based construct, and the trauma-based construct might look like, oh, they looked at me just like my father used to look at me, and they made those nasty statements about me and told me how bad I was and I'll never be any good and I'll never be worthy. And so now my mind has got this whole perceptual construct about generational patterns and not being good and not being worthy, and now I'm going to try to work through all the aspects of that and fix it, figure it out. Forgiveness collapses that sort of thing and gives us a chance to return to the presence of love. What I'm starting to comprehend is that if I have deeply and strongly enough cultivated my relationship with love so as to function out of love and have love fully present in me, that has a disabling effect on carbon-based memory and its ability to generate perceptual constructs that can become very convoluted. You know, it's like the octopus. There's an arm heading in every direction, and trying to handle all of that becomes very complex and difficult. If I've deeply enough, and again, this is just, this is an awareness that's just come for me personally in my process after 50 years, of realizing that if I've cultivated that and it is deeply present in me, then my mind can't generate those pain-based perceptual constructs. It's like I get to pass the complexities and all the hanging shads, the octopus arms of those pain-based generational constructs of my mind, perceptual structures. I get to bypass that, and I get to step into directly processing the energy that lies beneath that. So rather than all the stuff my mind has made up out of that, put down that happened when I was 5 years of age and I've been working with for 50 years, rather than having to deal with that whole big construct of my mind that just gets more and more complex and more resistant, when I have that deep enough awareness of, connection with, and honor for the presence of love in me, all of those constructs are bypassed, and I can just go back and process the actual original energy of the offense that happened. And I'm just learning to speak about it, so that would be my, next week I may have totally new languaging for it, but that would be my languaging at this point.
All right, that sounds like the next level of forgiveness process in a way. It's like a constant ability to bypass dissociation from non-being content and just be able to bring it immediately to the altar of love and remove it.
Right. The root energy behind it, rather than having to work through all the constructs that come from it. That would be the difference. And then, and I brought this up in last night's intensive, a new piece of the puzzle came, and for anybody that was in the intensive last night, thank you for the support as we processed that, and afterward I got another whole new piece of that puzzle for me. And so what I brought up was a simple offhanded remark or comment that was made 40 years ago. You know, I've talked about gnawing on things with this work. Well, this is a single sentence that was spoken 40 years ago as we were working on the Kabour's manuscript that I have gnawed on from time to time, and I finally got the gift. You know, they talk about wrestling with angels. Well, I finally got the gift from that last night after the intensive. And I talked about, you know, you've heard me speak of Dan McDougall before. We worked for years on the Kabour's manuscript together. We literally spent, yeah, you have. So Dan and I used to spend 2, 3, 4 hours a day on the phone. You know, he was in Albany, Georgia. I was in Theodosia. And, I mean, my phone bills used to be $1,000, $1,500, $1,800. We would spend hours processing around this translation work. And we were in the middle of working on it. I don't even remember what it was we were working on in particular, but Dan came up with a translation of one line, and I don't even know where that line is. I don't know what it is at this point. It was just this sentence that came up in the middle of our conversation. And because we were working on other things, we never went back to it, and I never really, you know, got to look any deeper. But and the line was that there's a point in one of the passages. Remember, we've talked about Rachma as a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain, and Kuba as the filter in the back of the brain. And the line that Dan came up with was, and what Yeshua said here was, let my Kuba be upon them. So it was that when this filter over perceptions keyed to love is active, there's an extension of energy to those around us. You've heard me speak about, you know, keeping love conscious, active, and present, and that's what creates healing.
Right.
So that came up for me in the conversation last night in the intensive as a result of interacting with the people in the intensive. And then, you know, when we were close to the end of the intensive, so we closed it out. And so I'm sitting and I'm just breathing and kind of being with that. And what I realized is, okay, I finally get it. If Kuba, this filter over the back of the brain, the perceptual part of the brain, that's keyed to love is fully active, then every bit of energy moving in me, everything that's resonating in me, every brain cell that's firing in me has to be keyed to love. And, you know, when you think about what when you realize that, you know, you look out and you see a forest filled with trees, the truth is you're not seeing what's out there. Your brain is creating a replica of the brain cells that are built of this forest filled with trees. That's a picture that's generated. That's a construct of mind that's generated from within. So what became clear to me last night, what I got the taste of was, okay, so now I get it. Let my Kuba be upon them. Is that if everything that's firing in me is literally keyed to love, then the energy wave synthesized by that energy moving in me, that high energy wave that leaves my mind is going to be a wave that is totally and completely in resonance with love. And remember, Marcel Vogel was able to measure those high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. So truly, if everything in me is in harmony, Kuba is truly active. Of course, Rachma has to be present too. Then I'm going to literally be able to radiate an actual energy wave that is sourced in love from and through me, and touch others with it. And you've heard, and it, you know, these pieces never fell together until just last night, and they're even getting clearer now. You know, you've heard me before say that 25 years ago I realized that the the key to healing was there one person in the space that could hold love, conscious, active, and present when something less than love was coming up.
Right.
If we can do that for ourselves and for each other, there's where the healing is. Well, I believe I'm now understanding what it meant is Yeshua saying, let my kuba be upon them, that's where the healing, that's the hem of Yeshua's garment that the woman who had the issue of blood needed to touch.
Exactly my thought. Exactly before you said it.
That was it. And you'll notice that he didn't say, I'm the hero who fixed your issue of blood. He says, it was you reaching to receive that. Yes, I was there as the support, but it was you reaching to receive that, being ready. You had prepared yourself for the healing that you just received. In that story, the Greeks translated as there was a throng of people around him. I don't know how many people there are in a throng in the Aramaic language or whatever the Greeks translated that as. But, it could have been, 2, 10, 20, 50, 100. It might have been the 5,000. I don't know. But there's only one person who got the healing. And that was the one person who was, through resonance, ready to receive that energy, which they called the hem of his garment, the radiant frequency of active present love. And that was enough to vitalize and boost her through what she was willing to process, and this really horrendous affliction for a woman in that day and age. I mean, she couldn't even go into the kitchen and feed her family for 12 years, which is her sacred duty, but because she's unclean for this issue of blood, she can't do that. So it's a major deal. And she's the only one in the throng that heals. And to me, it just reinforces that, the reason for me to do my work is to make myself ready for that. And as I do my work, for instance, with my granddaughter, what I'm really doing is extending the hem of my garment to her continuously, whatever she does. I mean, we're blessed. She's so easy. She's such a sweet creature. And like kids do, she does stuff. And I realize that when she does stuff and it brings up something in me, my job is to clean that up in me that fast. To have the skill, to have developed the ability to clean it up that fast. And I'd offer that your job in your relationship is to do exactly the same. That's the job that each of us has. And we do that.
That's great.
We transform everything.
Yeah, it seems to me that premise, that principle could be why a being could be born into this planet and just immediately be acting as the presence of love continuously throughout their entire life as Christ. It's like it's
what we're designed for.
It's yummy, yummy, yummy.
Yep. And it's my job at this point as her grandfather specifically, and I'm willing to be on the support team of every child that comes into the world, but at this point, it's my job to be in that space with her, to make sure that the hem of my garment, that love is present in every fiber of my being continuously to create that support platform for her.
Thank you very, very much for the conversation today and yesterday, and for all the amazing work, Living Love Present. And I want to invite anybody who's been listening that may have some comment or thought for me to send it to Jeannie, who can forward it to me. And I'm very grateful for the time and especially for this evolution in the work that's coming forward that you're expressing about today. That's just very, very delicious.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you've been gnawing on the work for a long time as well. And it's a matter of, together we can do this. Together we can pull this together. And it takes each individual, the realm of questioning that you've developed because of your challenges becomes the gift to this work, because the thoughts and directions I might never think of going. And so, together we get to open those spaces, and the beauty of each individual that comes to this work. You may have heard me say this before or may not, but there's the story that's told about Einstein, and they said to him, if you were given a challenge, a task to complete, and you had to complete it in 1 hour or you would die, what would you do? And what he said was, I would spend 55 minutes of the hour asking questions until I knew what the right question was, and then in 5 minutes I'd have it solved. And to me, that's what this radio show is about, is every person, this whole conversation today was started by a young woman who called in from Arizona 2 days ago, and, just opened a whole different space that's determined the direction that the show has gone in, and I think probably been a home run for everybody who's listening, and certainly for me. And so this one will be another one. The last 2 days' shows Jeannie's put up as special shows in the separate archives, and this will be still another, and we'll probably mark these 3 days, while I think about it, Jeannie, as being part of the next time we do a Healing Through Relationships intensive. So thank you, Doug, for your gnawing and your questioning mind and the work you have done and the work you're willing to do, and as we move it forward.
All right. We'll move it forward. Thank you.
Yay. All right. Well, any other thoughts for you? We're down to about 6 minutes. Go for it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm just I'm ready to lay down and let the, invite.
Connect in. Yeah, I'm with you.
Love
I'm with you.
Flow.
And the world says there's so much for us to do that we haven't got time for that. We need to go out and get busy and get things done. And we become human doings, and it's time for us to spend time in being. When everybody hears the result of living and being, they go, oh, yeah, I want that, I want that, I want that. Oh, wait a minute. You mean you actually want me to engage in some different thoughts and to do things differently? No. I want to keep doing what I've been doing. I just want that. And it's like, nah, you can't have it. You got to do what it takes. And of course, the next statement, once somebody goes, oh, I can really have that? Hooray, I want it yesterday. Well, it was the same 2,000 years ago, and the response was, you can't storm the gates to the kingdom. You got to do your work. It's just, it's not something we get knighted with. It's what we produce when we do the work of, once again, truly becoming human in a world where there's very little human life. We have what we call human forms, but finding a human life in there, find someone who, especially when the stress is up and the chips are down, who really truly believes in God. And what that means is, to me, not the old religious concept of believes in God, but what that means to me is someone who, when the stress is up and the chips are down, the first order of business is to turn to love rather than hostility and fear. That's someone who has a relationship with God. Anybody who talks about God and, I love God and no. But when the stress is up and the chips are down, I turn to my rage and my fear and my hatred and my vengeance and getting even and winning. And the person's got to stop kidding themselves if they have any interest in a relationship with love, because their gods are already established, and their gods are hateful and rageful and traumatizing. And the forgiveness work is about giving up those gods, those things we've been taught to rely on, those power person dynamics, and reawaken to the truth of who we are.
I like the statement you today, honoring love more than trauma.
Yeah. That's it. And honor means take love into action toward love. Take your being into action. And so when I take time every day to be with the presence of love, somebody might say, but you're not doing anything. Well, actually, I'm doing the most important thing I could possibly do. So thank you, Doug, for your thinking and your questions and the space we've come to, and we're down to the last minute or so. So I'm just going to invite everybody to once again create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. It's a gift we each designed to give. Blessings. Bye.
I choose to live more consciously, evolving continuously.
Thank you for listening to Mind Shifters Radio with Dr. Michael Ryce and myself, Jeannie Ryce, and Dr. Tim Hayes and Michelle Pichet, as we present the first century Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. We are here for 2 hours every Monday through Friday from 12 noon to 2 o'clock Eastern Time on Mind Shifters Radio. For more information on Aramaic forgiveness, please visit www.whyagain.org. That's www.whyagain.org.